It's a very difficult area because communication requires two things. One, it requires the people who are trying to communicate to think about the audience they're trying to communicate with, what they're trying to communicate, and why they're trying to communicate it. That's one aspect. And that requires a lot of rethinking for a lot of scientists because we're used to communicating with a much narrower spectrum of informed people. But some people are very good at it. Some scientists are great at it. Of course, some scientists give up science relatively early to take on that communication role and to be more philosophical and broader in their approach. And a classical case would be Richard Dawkins. And Tim Flannery is another one who's, did science for quite a long time, but now has gone to a much broader communication type role. So that's fine. But the other issue is are the people you're trying to communicate willing to listen? Are they willing to engage? Are they willing to make the effort? Because it does take some effort, and that's a major problem. So how do you do this? I mean, how do you seduce people into being interested? Well, you can do it through the Attenborough type approach. He's wonderful. How much science he actually gets across, I'm not sure. And there are very good TV programs. They're available on national television. They're available on ABC, on SBS in the main. And how many people watch them? They're there. They're free to air. How many people will actually engage? So that's a major issue. How do we get people to engage? I found that, for instance, shock jocks will not on the main talk to scientists because they're afraid they're going to be embarrassed. They'll ask the wrong question. They're afraid someone will come back to them and say they're stupid or something. It's not the case, actually. Most of us are quite happy to talk to anybody, or many of us are, and try and get an idea across in terms that we think someone who's not focused on that area can actually get. But it takes effort. There are science communication courses in Australia and degrees and so forth. People do find jobs, but the level of science literacy in the general population, I don't know, quite frankly. I mean, a lot of people are heavily engaged by the climate science issue, and that implies some level of science literacy. People do wear seatbelts. Now, maybe it's just they're afraid of the law, but I think probably most people understand that an impact will be much worse if they're not wearing a seatbelt. So I think there's a level of science literacy out there that we may underestimate. On the other hand, in my area, for instance, in this book, which is a sort of a general book on pandemic infections, and it's a question and answer book, actually, so it's kind of pandemics for the general audience, you will read from a journalist who would call a vaccine a drug. Now, that's the most basic misunderstanding of the products, because a vaccine is something you give to stimulate an immune response. A drug is a chemical that you give that will disappear on a set sort of half-life to treat a particular condition. Drugs and vaccines are very, very different. Many people don't understand the difference between a virus and a bacterium. Now, it's kind of important because a bacterium is a single cell with all the machinery of a cell, so it can be targeted by broad-spectrum antibiotics. The virus, on the other hand, grows within our cells, and you need a very specific treatment that targets the virus because it's using our cells. We can't kill our own cells. So these very, very basic understandings are missing, for instance, in a lot of the media people. So if you think they're missing in journalists, where are they in the general population? I don't know. I mean, I try to communicate, but I'm not studying science communication as such. And it's something that has to be studied in the same sense that we study any other sociological phenomenon. Well, I think the modern science communication, who are we really interested in targeting? We'd like to be able to target the old guys who vote for regressive politicians, but they're probably resistant to everything. So who are we going to target? Well, we need to target young people. How do you target young people? You don't do it through newspapers. You don't do it through books. You do it through social media. You do it through podcasts. You do it through material that's available online. And so the more we can do in that area, the more we can make interesting stories around science that explain science and how it works, the better. So it's an activity, I think, for young people coming into it, not for old guys like me. I'll write books and things, but it's a totally different world. And that's the way it needs to be engaged. And it's great. I mean, you know, what can be more illustrative of, say, methane release from the tundras than having someone simply set fire to the tundra? And you can show that on YouTube. I mean, you look it up on YouTube anytime. The north, I mean, you've got the Canadian tundras, the Russian, where you've got all this biological material which is fermented to give you methane. And so, you know, when the ice lasts, it's all accumulated just as coal and gas, you know. So you've got all this methane stored there. And as all the ice comes off, we expect the methane to come out. And you can go to some Canadian lakes, for instance, and you can just light the lake, or light the actual tundra where the methane's coming off. And just look it up on YouTube. Just put in burning methane on the tundra. You'll get little videos showing it.